What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here of the BlockHash Podcast, your number one resource for all that is happening across the emerging tech space. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. Today, I'm joined by Alexei, co-founder of Bob. Today, we're going to learn about Bob and how they combine the security of Bitcoin with the DeFi innovation of Ethereum to create the best place to build and earn yield with BTC. Alexei, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you on today. How you doing?
Hey, great. Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Excited to have a conversation with you to get things underway. I'm sure people would love to learn a little bit more about yourself. If you don't mind telling us a bit about your backgrounds and maybe what excited you about Bitcoin, BitcoinFi, Web3 in general, what kind of anchored you and got you into the space?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I got into the crypto space through Bitcoin, I think like the majority of the space right now. And what really got me excited was not just the technology, but what else we can do with Bitcoin itself. So, not just the financial aspect, but also the technological one. I started around 10 years ago, so I've been working in Bitcoin R&D space for quite some time. I got really excited about Namecoin and merge mining, so how you could reuse proof of work to secure other blockchains and what else we could build around Bitcoin without changing the core system itself, and spent essentially the last 10 years working on different ways of how to achieve new interesting use cases. For me, the primary driver and why I'm still doing this is that as we push towards more adoption of Bitcoin and more users buy into the vision, start accessing BTC as an alternative to the dollar, to the euro, see it as really this global neutral ledger. One of the biggest questions is how do we make sure they can use Bitcoin for more than just payments? Can we build a new financial system on top of BTC without always falling back into the traditional finance model, without always trusting centralized providers? Because for me, what is quite concerning is that despite Ethereum, Solana, and all these other newer ecosystems having a flourishing DeFi, environment with so many applications you can use without always having to go to a centralized provider. And the UX of these apps is so much better in some cases than centralized exchanges. However, for Bitcoin, it doesn't work, right? You always have to either wrap BTC through a centralized provider where you give up custody and you end up trusting an institution, or you go to a centralized exchange. So if you want to use Bitcoin for anything else than just sending it around, you have to introduce trust. You go back to this traditional financial system. And for me, this is a very big controversy. And I find it great and very exciting that so many new institutions are adopting Bitcoin. We have the ETF, we have treasury companies buying up Bitcoin. But if in 10 years' time, I have to go ask my bank if I'm allowed to send my Bitcoin, if I can use it for something, well, then it's not Bitcoin anymore for me. Then it's actually something else. And our mission is to onboard the next billion users into DeFi, where we use Bitcoin as rails, because Bitcoin is the number one digital asset. It's bigger than everything else combined. Everyone knows about BTC. And that's the opportunity, in my opinion, of a decade to take those users and guide them into DeFi using Bitcoin kind of as the prime on-ramp.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm curious how you guys are going about onboarding that next billion users into areas like BitcoinFi. What kind of solution is BOB providing on that front? Like, I know that you're taking the security element that Bitcoin offers, you're combining that with Ethereum's DeFi capabilities, but what does that mean exactly, and how does those two things come together?
So if I start maybe with a very boring explanation that's more like closer to Web 2, I guess, is what we're doing is we're building banking infrastructure for Bitcoin. It sounds boring, but ultimately what we allow you to do is take credit lines against BTC, send it around in a more efficient way, trade it against other assets, invest Bitcoin into financial products where you get yield, and do all these things without introducing the requirement of trust. And of course, like there's always two angles of trust. There is, of course, the technical and technological approach where we remove trust using new technologies. And that's where BitVM comes into play, and also Bob's hybrid chain design. But at the same time, we're quite pragmatic. We know that technology takes time to mature, that people in many cases will still initially prefer to trust big institutional players who they assume will not steal their money. And so you have to find the middle ground between pushing for technological innovation, but still offering products that people can use today. So what Bob is doing now, more from the Web3 perspective or from the user's perspective, really what you see on the outside is we're providing and we're building the gateway to Bitcoin DeFi. So our mission is that if you want to use Bitcoin DeFi, that ultimately Bob is used in the backend. We provide the tools to take Bitcoin, put it into DeFi with one click into DeFi strategies, whether it's on our chain or on other networks, and receive rewards in Bitcoin itself. We allow you to trade BTC against stablecoins, one-click borrow stables against Bitcoin. Make that process as seamless as possible so that you don't have to worry about the infrastructure components in between, the bridging and so on. Just like you go to an ATM and withdraw cash, or you go to Robinhood and you invest your dollars into ETFs, it should be the same experience with Bitcoin. You should not have to worry about wallet management, bridges, wrapping, and whatnot. And so how we do this is we work with partners that have institutional clients, that have retail users as clients, be it wallets, be it fintechs, be it institutional custodians, and help them develop their Bitcoin strategy. So help them onboard users into BTC, offer them new Bitcoin products, whether it's yield, Bitcoin as collateral, or trading or swaps.
Got it. I'm curious also about your, native Bitcoin integrations. I know that you guys use a hybrid BitVM bridge, correct? How does that kind of factor into the ecosystem projects in particular, and what can you kind of highlight as an example?
As a platform, our goal is to provide the most secure way to access Bitcoin yield and Bitcoin DeFi. That means having a very secure execution environment so that you don't have to trust us as an operator when you're using Bitcoin once it's on Bob. And the way we do this is using a hybrid chain design where we essentially inherit security from Ethereum, but at the same time also inherit finality from Bitcoin. So we're secure by both networks. And we do this by using Bitcoin staking, where people can stake their Bitcoin and verify what's actually happening on Bob, and then they sign off and confirm that everything is valid. So basically proof of stake using Bitcoin as the asset. And with Babylon, who is one of the infrastructure partners in this space, they have already secured 5 billion in deposits in Bitcoin that is basically ready to secure the network. And that gives you a very secure place to use your BTC. But then the question, and that's where we come to the bridge, the question is obviously, well, how do I get my Bitcoin securely into this very secure platform? And because Bitcoin can only exist on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? If you want to use it somewhere else, you have to deposit it into something that locks the Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain and creates a representation on whatever platform you want to use. And it's the same for exchanges or layer 2s or other blockchains, right? Whether you put your Bitcoin onto Ethereum, Bob, or Coinbase or Binance, the process is the same. You lock it up and you hope that you can always get it back once you're done using it. And so what we do is we try to remove trust from this process. Previously, bridges and how they are today, when you want to lock your Bitcoin, you use a so-called bridge. It's a bit misleading because, again, it's the same process. You don't say I'm bridging into Binance. You deposit into Binance. They have your Bitcoin. They can lose it, right? In the worst case, like with Bybit, which hopefully will be all recovered. But, you have trust into that system. And now when you deposit into Bob, okay, well, once it's there, once you have this wrapped Bitcoin version on Bob, that part is secure. But how do you get it in and out is obviously the tricky bit. And in our case, instead of using trusted centralized providers where, I could say, oh, give your Bitcoin to me and then, trust me, bro, I'm going to return it to you, which is not necessarily the best approach. I could use a multisig where I say, okay, well, there's a few institutional partners that you should trust. And, they together have to, maintain custody, and they hopefully went through the Bitcoin. And that is the approach people use today in most cases. And arguably, it works quite well with big institutional custodians taking up these roles. However, in the long term, and in our opinion, to onboard the next billion users, we have to offer a better model. We have to offer something that's close to being Bitcoin native. And that's what BitVM is. BitVM allows you to deposit your BTC into Bob and always get it out, right? So it works the same way as Ethereum rollups that use fraud proofs. So the idea is you deposit into some smart logic on the Bitcoin's blockchain. There are operators that may operate the bridge. You get your Bitcoin on Bob, and if you want to go get it back, either you get it back, right? So the withdrawal works, everything's fine. Or if the operators of the bridge try to steal, you can challenge them. Or anybody else in the network can say, wait a second, something's wrong. I'm going to issue a challenge within the period of 1 to 2 weeks. And if you do that and you can prove that, well, the withdrawal is not being processed correctly, the operator is punished, your Bitcoin are recovered, and this way we can prevent theft from happening. It's the same model that you see in Arbitrum, where you can deposit Ethereum from ETH into Arbitrum, right? And if you want to withdraw it, you have this fraud-proof logic. These are things that are called optimistic rollups. And basically what BitVM does, it allows us to create the exact same thing. So now you'll be able to deposit your Bitcoin into Bob, and we call this native BTC. Why? Because when you use ETH on Arbitrum, on Base, on these other Ethereum rollups, you don't say it's Arbitrum ETH or it's Base ETH. It's just ETH, right? Because it inherits the security from Ethereum. Well, in our case, by combining this hybrid model where you have Bitcoin staking security plus this native BitVM-powered bridge, we can say, well, look, this is really the best possible way to use Bitcoin in DeFi. We cannot steal it. The operators cannot steal it. You'll always get it back as long you yourself or somebody else in the network is online to check and say, wait a second, if something is wrong, I'm going to flag it. And that is a major milestone because it's a 0-to-1 improvement in security, where previously you'd have to trust one institution or that there's like a majority of honest signers. In this model, you only need one honest person somewhere, and this honest person can be yourself.
Nice. I love it. And I think another important aspect, in terms of onboarding so many people into the space is good UX. And that's one thing that I noticed with you guys that I really liked is the fact that you guys are exploring, better UX. I saw a one-click Bitcoin element for DeFi development, for staking, for integrations. I think that's something that's really key for making things easy for people because the space can be very complicated when we're talking about bridging this and sending that, connecting that wallet. I think that's an important aspect, and curious also how you make that possible, how you stream everything so that it is like one click. And then also on top of that, like what are your thoughts on UI and UX in the space too? Because it's something I think has lagged, I think, for a long time, but I think it's starting to get a little bit more attention, and I think will help bring more people into the industry.
UX is certainly one of the biggest pain points when you want to use Bitcoin for something else than just sending it around. If we're honest, Bitcoin wallets are generally quite difficult to use. Most people keep Bitcoin on exchanges or on their ledger. And if you follow the recent debates about Bitcoin self-custody, a lot of people are flagging that, honestly, for retail, self-custody is not necessarily the best approach because Bitcoin tooling is really not ideal. And it gets even worse if you want to do something with it, right? Like if you want to use Bitcoin and DeFi today, you have to pick a chain and you have to decide, okay, which representation of Bitcoin do I use on that chain, right? Whereas on Binance, you just deposit and Binance has like your Bitcoin and they display your BTC on the exchange. Well, what happens right now is that you have 50 on different blockchains, you have 50 different wrappers. You have 50 different bridges that you can use to get your Bitcoin from BTC into one of these DeFi protocols. Which one are you going to use? Each interface looks different. They have different withdrawal times. There's different wallets that are supported. So you have to maybe move your Bitcoin to another wallet first. It's a big problem right now. It's fragmented. It's hard to use. It's very confusing. And if you want to get it from Binance into a chain and back, that's a multi-step process and it's not retail friendly. So what we built is the first, what we call Bitcoin intents system. Intents are a mechanism that is powering the majority of cross-chain interactions in the Ethereum's and Solana space right now, where you basically say, hey, I'm on this chain, I'm on Ethereum, I want to do something on Arbitrum, and you give an intent. So you indicate what you actually want to do. So whether it's a swap or I want to deposit into a different protocol on Arbitrum, and then solvers actually go and search for this kind of route for you. So they take your asset and they give you the final kind of position in return. So you swap, but the solver will give you not just, let's say, ETH and Arbitrum, but they can give you ETH locked up in a different protocol. And this is dominating the cross-chain interaction space right now on Ethereum. And what we built is the first system that does this for Bitcoin. So the idea is that you as a user, you have BTC, and let's say you want to borrow stable coins on Aave, and you want to receive them in your wallet. Right. Now, normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to go find a bridge, wrap your Bitcoin, then also make sure that this is exactly the version of wrap BTC that Aave will accept, deposit into Aave, enable it as collateral, borrow the stablecoin, withdraw to your wallet. And that's very simple interaction. Like borrowing is very, very simple in DeFi kind of terms. Now, with Bob, it's one transaction, right? You just send Bitcoin and you say, hey, I want to select this strategy. And what will happen is that the solver will essentially swap and you will get in return the final position. And there's a mix of smart contract logic. So where we have like automated strategies on the smart contract side and a trustless swap, where essentially the way it actually works under the hood is you swap Bitcoin for one of the big RapidTC versions. And then our smart contract logic on Bob automatically deposits into whatever strategy you like. And this logic can be used to either deposit Bitcoin into DeFi or to swap it against other assets, whether it's on the Bob chain or, and this is something we're developing right now and we'll be releasing shortly, multi-chain on any major network. And this is the technical side, right? This is how it works for the user. It's simple. It's one click and you're done. You have your Bitcoin either on Solana, or you have locked it up into a staking protocol on Base, or you've borrowed stable coins against it on Bob. Doesn't matter. It's very simple to use. And based on the feedback we've received so far, we've had multiple partners and like wallets already integrate our product called Bob Gateway as their backend for these Bitcoin yield strategies. Because the benefit that we offer to partners here is not only that, it saves their users lots of steps and reduces the drop-off rates, but also we work with different protocol partners, both on Bob and soon on other networks. So instead of, if you're a wallet provider, instead of having to integrate manually 10 different strategies and like figure out how you get them on different chains, you just plug in Bob Gateway and you get access to all the ones we already support. And that obviously offers a very big upside to distribution partners like wallets, institutional custodians, and fintechs that are looking to offer their users different Bitcoin strategies without having to, deal with all the technical integrations. So it's really like a very simple API integration and you're good to go.
Interesting. And what are some of those partners, if you don't mind mentioning, or if you can, like some of the providers, the custodials, the wallets, like who you guys are working with?
On the wallet side, like one very good example is Xverse. It's one of the biggest Bitcoin-focused wallets that also emerged, especially as the leader in the space when ordinals and Bitcoin assets were dominant. And they, for example, use Bob Gateway as their main staking backend. We've worked with projects like Pell, Sovereign, and Staking Rewards, Everstake, and there's other institutional partners that are working on integrating this into their front ends. On the institutional custody side, we're working with teams like Fireblocks and 4DeFi to essentially offer their institutional customers easy access to different Bitcoin strategies. And on the multi-chain side, and I don't want to leak too much, but we're working with some of the leading bridge providers to offer their users and their integration partners direct access to Bitcoin. One of the biggest challenges right now with Bitcoin is it is really difficult to deal with. The architecture is different. It's a quite big lift. And most teams end up focusing on EVM, maybe Solana, but that's it. And instead of them having to do the heavy lifting and like build everything themselves, we just offer a one-click integration, right? So one of the benefits of Bob as a chain, as a system to DeFi projects like, Euler, Uniswap, and Aave, or bridges and cross-chain swap providers like, Layer 0, CCIP, by Chainlink across, is that you only need to integrate the Bob EVM, which is super easy. It's the same execution environment as Ethereum. It's very easy for them to integrate because they already support the EVM, but they get support and access for native Bitcoin deposits. So instead of having to manually, work with the Bitcoin UTXO model, figure out wallet support, how you get the swaps right, you just plug in Bob and that's it. And it works out of the box. And for bridges that, currently support multi-chain logic between Ethereum, BNB chain, Base, Arbitrum, maybe Solana, they just plug in Bob and then instantly you can route Bitcoin native BTC to all of these chains without having to build custom logic.
So a common question I get actually quite often is about Bitcoin, DeFi on Bitcoin, BitcoinFi, whatever we want to call it. It's not something that has existed for a very, very long time. And it's kind of interesting that as much as we've developed across the Web3 sphere, a lot of that is, now come back to Bitcoin. And the question I get is, is this something that's sustainable on Bitcoin? Is this something that could have repercussions or hold Bitcoin back or clog up the chain? Could there be issues in terms of that being compatible with Bitcoin's architecture and the difficulty there? I guess the question is, is Bitcoin DeFi something that's, sustainable long term? Why are we doing this? Is this where's the value down the line in building out all these different systems and architectures and layers around Bitcoin and bringing DeFi to Bitcoin. What are your kind of thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
Well, I think it's kind of important to really highlight that DeFi on Bitcoin itself natively doesn't really exist, right? I know people like to call it native, but usually, when you go beyond the surface, there's always some level of additional trust involved. The issue is that Bitcoin is not really designed to support DeFi, right? 10-minute block times, even just that is already a blocker, right? How are you going to trade every 10 minutes? It's just too slow. So we end up with second layers, whether it's for payments like Lightning, which was dominating and still is probably the leading layer 2 for payments, but it didn't really get traction because it's so hard to use, because it really tried to be Bitcoin native, not use any other virtual machines and not any other smart contract logic. So I think by now the consensus within the Bitcoin community, even with maxis, is that the best way to unlock new use cases for Bitcoin is to create layer 2s that inherit Bitcoin security and have trust minimized bridging. So you can deposit your assets, use them, get them back. This does not change Bitcoin's core software. It does not require forks, which are very controversial, right? I mean, changing Bitcoin's code base is changing the code base of a $1 trillion system. You don't want to do that frequently. It's very hard to do, very hard to achieve consensus of what change should happen. So I think while, native Bitcoin DeFi and Bitcoin is being romanticized a lot, it's really unlikely to happen in the near future. What we consider native Bitcoin DeFi is if you can deposit your Bitcoin into a platform like Bob, and it's still arguably Bitcoin because, you don't have any central third party that's custodying your assets. You have cryptographic primitives that secure this deposit, and you can use it on Bob, which inherits Bitcoin security, and then you can always withdraw. Of course, there is some risk involved. There's always going to be risk involved if you put Bitcoin into DeFi, just like there's risk involved if you deposit Bitcoin to a centralized exchange. But again, I think, and I do speak, I think, for the industry at this point where there's broad consensus that layer 2 solutions that connect to Bitcoin, build around it, offer better execution environments, more tools, better performance are the way to really build out DeFi on Bitcoin. Will it have, clog the chain? No, it won't, because it happens off chain, right? For Bitcoin, you deposit and Bitcoin doesn't even know if it's on Binance or on Bob, it doesn't care, right? It's off Bitcoin, it's being actively used and traded. At the same time, however, with these native deposits and bridges, as more layer 2s emerge, whether it's specializing in different use cases, different geographical locations where people will be moving across them, right? And if you look at Ethereum layer 2s, there's billions of dollars of volume every single day being transferred between these different chains. Now, if you have these native bridges using BitVM that start with Bitcoin and they connect to all these other networks, when you move your assets between different layer 2s, you will ultimately be reflecting this on the Bitcoin chain. That does create transactions, that does create demand for block space. It doesn't clog the chain, right? But it creates sufficient demand, hopefully, to sustain Bitcoin's fee model, because there's a fine balance between, we're clogging the chain because it's too much, or it's empty and there's no fees for miners to continue mining. So you need to maintain a fine balance. And I think this infrastructure development with BitVM and hopefully more and better systems in the future where you have layer 2s that inherit Bitcoin security, and then they still contribute partially back to the system and don't completely vampire off, but actually contribute back fees to the Bitcoin system. That is very important and hopefully very synergetic development that will help unlock more utility for Bitcoin as an asset, but at the same time contribute to the Bitcoin security budget, which again should not be underestimated. Satoshi himself once said, right, in the future, there'll either be a lot of transaction on Bitcoin or there won't be any at all. And I hope that we get to there's going to be a lot of transactions. They may be happening not just on Bitcoin, but elsewhere, but we still are contributing fees back to the core system to maintain an incentive for mining and actually securing the system.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd rather see more transactions than no transactions on Bitcoin. And I think it's great that people are finding ways to explore and fully tap Bitcoin's potential and to not necessarily build everything on top of Bitcoin. Like you said, 10-minute block times, like these things, really hold it back in terms of the way it's designed. And, we're not going to go change Bitcoin's $1 trillion plus asset in ecosystem already, but including Bitcoin in the DeFi, trend and movement and in the space, I think is the key point to mention, and I think is an important thing given how foundational Bitcoin is within the entire Web3 space. So it does make a lot of sense to me, and I'm excited to see where that eventually goes. In terms of development on Bob, like if there's a developer out there that wants to start building, they want to dive into documentation, where can they go? Can they find that like on the website, or do you have a particular place where they can kind of educate themselves?
You can find everything on the website. The website is gobob.xyz, short for Go Build on Bitcoin. So we're encouraging people to build on Bitcoin, build with Bitcoin, and use Bitcoin as an asset in DeFi, whether it's using existing systems that are custodial but institutional backed, or hopefully more and more working with the new systems that we're developing like BitVM. So you can find the docs on our main website, or if you go to docs.gobob.xyz, there's a lot of details there. It's very easy to get started because, again, we use the EVM. So if you're used to that, if you've built in the Ethereum environment, it's very easy to get started. We have the same tooling as Base and Arbitrum, right? There's virtually no difference in terms of developing whether you're building on Base, Arbitrum, or Bob. The difference that we offer is that we offer you additional tooling to interact with Bitcoin, to have native deposits into your app or withdrawals back to BTC, triggering transactions on Bitcoin, right? So if you want to do something on BTC based on some conditions, or for example, you want your users to be able to withdraw BTC, continuously take profits in native Bitcoin, we also allow you to verify things that happen on BTC, whether it's payments, deposits, difficulty changes, block space development. So you can build a lot of things and verify them cryptographically. So your smart contract can react to things that occur on the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's the perfect toolkit to get started and explore different things that we can do with BTC, be it, building better ways to borrow against BTC, Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, on-off ramps for Bitcoin into DeFi, building essentially one-click vault strategies into like offering people yield. Or if it's something more exotic, going more into the NFT direction where, you could build hybrid ordinals. So it's not all stored on Bitcoin, but there's data stored on BTC as the most secure database, but it's still compatible with an EVM environment. They're closely tied together, so you could still use them and actually use these things in game and whatnot. Or you could build markets that price in the Bitcoin difficulty or the block space, right? Often Bitcoin gets clogged during times where there's a lot of things going on. Right now, the fees are quite low, but they usually spike suddenly. And then I think block space will get more and more in demand with Bitcoin rollups emerging and posting more data into this. Into the chain. So building markets where you can hedge against like difficulty changes for miners, or tokenize hash rate and verify that a certain hash rate is being performed by the mining pools, or again hedging the Bitcoin fees are all tools that will become more and more in demand in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. And Bob provides you the best tools to build those.
So what's on your guys' horizon for Bob the rest of 2025? Do you guys have any important announcements, milestones coming up? What should people know?
Well, I can naturally leak all the alpha and all the announcements up front. But some of the interesting developments that are worth mentioning are, first of all, Bob has just become the first hybrid ZK rollup right now on Ethereum, but where we have a very efficient proving system where we only use ZK proofs when necessary on demand, which allows us to maintain Ethereum security. It's also the stepping stone to then also add in Bitcoin security with staking and BitVM. Next on the roadmap is bringing BitVM to production. Right now we have it running on testnet with institutional partners. The go-to-market with BitVM here is again, finding a pragmatic approach, balancing technical trust and institutional trust, where ultimately we want everybody to use the technical cryptographically secure solution, but it's new. So the best way to do that is that the operators aren't just random anonymous people, but they are institutions, the same institutions that currently you trust anyway if you wrap your Bitcoin in a custodial way. So that's essentially one of the big milestones that we're looking to release in Q4 this year. So it's when we release this bridge to mainnet, it's not just us running it, but it'll be operated by leading institutional providers that have no reason to try to steal. So it's kind of balancing the technical novelty risk with institutional kind of trust at the start, and then gradually people will become more and more aware of the technology. And at the same time, as this will make Bob the most secure place to use Bitcoin and DeFi. And the goal is that Bob as a chain is really there to onboard new Bitcoin users who are conservative, who are careful, who are new to the system, and want to have a very secure place to put their Bitcoin to work. And for more long-term investments, using it as collateral to borrow stable coins. And at the same time, multi-chain, you'll always have new opportunities for Bitcoin. You'll always have new places emerge, not just on Bob, right? Where we're obviously bootstrapping and fostering an ecosystem, but there's always Solana, Ethereum, Base, Aptos, Sui. Every major chain is developing a Bitcoin strategy. Every major DeFi app is developing a Bitcoin strategy, but they all will need Bitcoin deposits. And that is what we're also developing right now. We'll be releasing it over the next weeks and months, is a way to one-click deposit into all major DeFi protocols across all major chains with one click, rooted and powered by the Bob infrastructure, by Bob Gateway. And these are kind of the two products that we're bringing to the market. On one hand, very secure deposits and DeFi use cases on Bob with tier one DeFi players. For example, Uniswap is already live on Bob. Euler is already live on Bob. And at the same time, allowing people who want to take more risk, who want to explore other ecosystems, and there are millions of users who are looking to do so, to do this in a much more simple and accessible manner, taking it multi-chain.
That's exciting, man. Looking forward to seeing all these developments come out here over time. Where's the best place to keep up with everything? Should people go to socials? What, the website? Do you have a blog? Do you have a community, Telegram, Discord? Where should people go?
I mean, we have all of that. Depends on the preference. The best place to start is the website, and then obviously finding us on Twitter. We have a big Discord community, we have a big Telegram community, and obviously do check out our blog, where we not only post updates but also release research pieces and on both tech and exciting developments in the Bitcoin DeFi space.
Awesome. And if anyone wants to connect with you, do you have an X? Do you have a LinkedIn, or where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. It's Alexei Zamyatin. Yeah, the last name is a bit complicated to pronounce. But if you just search on Twitter for Alexei Bob, you'll find me. And yeah, my DMs are always open. And of course, you can also reach out to us on Telegram or just join our Discord channel and ping us there.
Awesome. Alexei, this has been great. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think it's very interesting what you guys are working on in particular. And I think, again, involving Bitcoin more in DeFi and kind of merging those two, I think is something that's really key to do right now. And creating easy solutions, making things seamless, one-click setups, dissolving away the complexity around it, I think is all, very important, especially for developers as well as users in the retail side. So appreciate all the work you're doing. Keep us up to date with where Bob's heading here in the near future. Would love to meet up at some point, maybe at a conference or an event. Maybe we can do an in-person episode and get acquainted there too. So keep me posted, and hopefully see you again soon here in the near future.
Amazing. Well, thanks for having me. We'll be in Korea, in Singapore, and also in Argentina this year. So yeah, definitely look forward to connecting.